welcome to Trusty Chords, the podcast which aims to celebrate music and those that create it. If you've been paying attention to artists coming out of the Gold Coast over the last 6 years, then you might have come across Chavez Cartel. A 5-piece alternative rock band, Chavez Cartel wasted almost no time in making a name for themselves on a local scale. Releasing a handful of singles in their debut year, the band shared both the Lucky Lucky and Confidence Is All I'm Taking Home EPs in 2019. Alongside a long list of live shows and festival slots, their profile continued to rise, with a COVID-inspired silence being ended by the Man's Best Friend EP in 2023 and their Red Flag Blues EP this year. But along the way, they kept on kicking goals, with a UK record label signing them in 2022, massive support from big names on the local touring circuit, and even support from the BBC since 2018. Put simply, while they've been flying under the radar on a mainstream level, Chavez Cartel have been putting in the hard yards behind the scenes. Fresh off the back of some shows in the US and the UK and the release of their Unfamiliar Boy single, the wonderful Ben Simpson was kind enough to join the podcast this week. If you've never listened to Chavez Cartel before, I reckon the magnetic Ben Simpson will be more than enough to convince you. Anyway, I implore you to check out Chavez Cartel's Red Flag Blues EP and their Unfamiliar Boy single, and once you're done giving that a spin, have a listen to my chat with Ben, and I'll see you at the end of the episode for some general housekeeping. Ben Simpson, thank you for joining the Trusty Chords podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, mate.
Now, to introduce yourself to people who might not know your name, can you give me a quick few words on who you are and why you're here?
Yeah, no worries. I would imagine most people don't know my name, so that I guess I'm talking to the masses here. I'm Ben Simpson. I'm vocalist of Chavez Cartel. We're an alt-rock band from Gold Coast, Australia.
So this podcast revolves around a love of music. So what I like to do at the start is go back to those early days and chat about when that spark first occurred. So for you, Ben, do you have any particular early memories of when music first resonated with you?
My earliest memory, and I would guess I'd be around 8 or 9 years old. The first time I really connected with music, and I didn't even realize it at the time, I just got a funny feeling, which I later reflected back on, was when I first heard a Jim Morrison song or a Doors song. I just remember feeling a bit funny inside. And I think a few years later, I realized it was the first time I actually appreciated music on a deeper level. So I would say, it would have been Jim Morrison, my first ever memory.
Right. So, was anything in particular that sort of resonated with you from that? Because he's obviously a very charismatic performer, but I mean, obviously, if you're seeing him, if you're seeing video of him, he's very charismatic. Right. But even hearing him, he manages to sort of portray that just in his voice alone. Was there anything sort of in particular?
I think again, I was like 8 or 9, so I can't really put my finger on what it did to that young boy. But yeah, I think just connecting to a male vocal that way, I just found it so, I don't know, I think like you've just said, he was mysterious without even looking at him. You didn't even have to see him to kind of be drawn into his mystery and his depth, and he kind of just mesmerized me from very young.
So in that young age, were there any sort of particular artists that you found yourself listening to a lot apart from Jim Morrison and the Doors?
I grew up at north of England, up in Yorkshire. So being from north of England, Oasis, absolutely. I reckon every young man at one stage or another growing up in the north of England wanted to be like or wanted to be Liam Gallagher, and I think I were no different back then. So I were obsessed with Oasis growing up. Yeah, Oasis would be the one.
I mean, I think that's another great example of, a frontman who has that sort of charisma, and I guess that charisma in a sort of love him or hate him sort of way. Because I feel like a lot of people either love or hate Jim Morrison, and a lot of people either absolutely adore Liam Gallagher or they sort of find his general way of behaving a little bit on the nose. But you certainly can't decry the good work that he puts forward, can you?
No, not at all. And I think when you're a frontman who doesn't, or at least doesn't play guitar live, I think you do have to have a certain edge, which is always divisive. I think when you've got an edge about you are putting yourself out there to be liked or disliked. And yeah, I kind of like my frontmen and I like my bands to have that sort of edgy attitude. And with love comes hate, and I think they're no different to that.
I mean, that was actually something I always found fascinating about Liam Gallagher, like the fact that, yeah, he didn't play guitar on stage or anything, but at the same time, he somehow managed to really arrest you, despite sort of striking that pose that looked like he was just, casually meandering around an art gallery, arms
Yeah,
behind the back, sort of looking up and everything like that. But it was still very arresting.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, absolutely. He stood still very well.
yes, he certainly did. So, were you the sort of person to listen to music at a young age and say, "Hey, when I grow up, I want to do that"?
No, no, not at all. And this kind of circles back to Jim Morrison. I was always into writing. Like I really like creative writing and poetry and stuff. And my earliest creative memories where I'm actually the one doing the output. It were more to do with writing. And then yeah, when I found out at a later age, Jim Morrison got into music the same way as a writer and then musically secondary. I connected on a deeper level with him like another good 10 years later. But no, not always. But then when I did finally start making music, it all kind of made sense. All my life kind of funneled into one direction as opposed to going out into a few different ones.
So then, how did you actually first get into playing music then? Like, was there a specific moment where you sort of realized, hey, I'm doing some writing, but that writing can also go pretty well if it's accompanied by some music?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, like a lot of me, the structures to me writing at the time, it were kind of obvious that there were lyrics and not poetry after a while. So then when I finally, I mean, I went traveling and I started writing. I thought I'd write a book. I thought I'd do like a Fear and Loathing sort of style writing, and what I actually ended up doing were writing songs. And then yeah, when I finally rocked up on Gold Coast, I didn't really know anyone, and I just thought, yeah, let's start a band.
So, and that leads seamlessly into my next question, which was, how did the band first come to be then? So you ended up in the Gold Coast, and I guess
Yeah,
hungry for a band in that case. So
yeah, I
how did
was. Yeah.
yeah how did you manage to find these like-minded individuals to start playing music with?
It took a while. Like, at first, I just went to like open mic nights and jam nights, and I just kind of mingled. I didn't really find what I was looking for in them nights, but I started to put some connections together. I found I think they were mostly just Facebook groups at start. Um, and it took a while. We went through quite a few lineup changes. And then to get to this one where now it probably took probably around 3 years. But Tom, who plays drums, I met him pretty much immediately after moving to Gold Coast. And yeah, two were better than one. And we kind of pieced it together quite quickly after that.
So then, when the band first sort of came together, was there any particular sound that you were sort of chasing as a group? Because I would also assume that as someone who was predominantly focused around lyrics and everything, you wouldn't necessarily have a sound that you were sort of looking for, or did you have a sound and it just so
Um,
happened?
Well, I've always been into grungy stuff, and when I got to Australia, it was very, or at least Queensland, grunge had still it was still very much in and very much admired, and I really like that. So I kind of just got with a bunch of lads, and it sounded quite grungy at first, which I never wanted to stay just grunge. I was always happy to take some elements of grunge forward, but I did want to leave it behind. I didn't want to be just one genre. But I'm really into like Brit. I like a lot of like old Brit pop, like 90s stuff. As I've said, I like a lot of shoegaze. I like grunge. I like a lot of like 60s alternative. And I guess when I met other people who like different things, we spent a good 2 or 3 years sort of compromising something what suited all four of us, which took a long time. But
Mm.
I feel like we got there by the end. But yeah, there were influence coming in from all angles from four different people.
And then I guess on that topic as well, as someone who has these myriad influences of different genres and everything, was there anything in particular that sort of influenced you in terms of vocal delivery as well?
So I've always really, really liked Iggy Pop. I like I just like his punky side, but he can also sing as well. He's got like a good bravado, and I think Iggy Pop because he can get away with snarling and he can get away with singing, and I think when you've got that diversity, I guess I always admire his diversity to be able to knock out them punky 3 minute bangers and to also sing a couple of ballads. So Iggy Pop definitely. I really like Lou Reed as well. I like how he kind of just speaks to his poetry, which I actually started off doing that as well. So Lou Reed, Iggy Pop, Jim Morrison, Liam Gallagher. I think they're probably my favorite vocalists, and
Mm.
I like Black Rebel Motorcycle Club too. In fact, I'm obsessed with Black Rebel Motorcycle Club.
Oh,
Um,
right. Fantastic
they,
band. Yeah.
they are, and they've got two beautiful vocalists, and yeah, they've left a good long lasting impression on me as well.
And then on that topic of that sort of diversity as well, that's something I've definitely noticed what from listening to the band over the years is that there is this very diverse sound. It's not like you're actually like that's why I sort of asked the question before, was there a particular sound you guys were chasing? Because there's this constant like feeling of evolution throughout things. So I guess if you were to sort of give the elevator pitch to someone who has never heard the band, how would you describe the music that you actually play as a group of musicians?
So I would say it's gritty. It's gritty post punk with, I guess, popular arrangements. So they're simple songs, but they've got a dirty, gritty stamp on them, and I guess that's what we are.
Yeah, no, that actually makes perfect sense, and it probably explains why I actually like you guys so much. Because that's the sort of thing where if I was sort of describing my musical taste, you're ticking all the boxes for me there.
Oh,
Um,
that's good to hear. Well, when we even when we were having these early discussions as a band, like really early on, we were always interested in finding something a little bit different, and we didn't really care how long that took. We didn't want a quick route to it, and even like with each EP, we never really were up until Man's Best Friend EP in 2023. We never really were interested in showcasing like a direct sound. We wanted to really just show versatility. So each EP before that, they did have some kind of like fluidity to them, and they had some consistencies, but they were very much five different sounding songs because we didn't ever want to pigeonhole ourselves and disappoint ourselves when we tried something different and it didn't quite work. We just wanted to keep our minds wide open from the start. So we're gonna continue to keep releasing songs that do sound. There will be a natural evolution to them, but there will be a noticeable difference to them as well.
Because that was actually something I noticed even just like today. Because obviously, before we have this, before I have a chat with a musician, I always like to make sure I'm up to date with everything they put out. So I was listening through the discography today and sort of going chronologically. And you listen to the EPs, like, and this is also for me, I guess, giving a bit of a timeline for the listener as well. You've got EPs like Lucky Lucky, the Confidence EP, Man's Best Friend, and this year's Red Flag Blues. And you can definitely sort of see how there is a lot more sort of versatility and diversity in those first couple. And the sound sort of becomes a bit more refined in these last ones. So I guess when you sort of look at the band, the music you make and everything, how do you sort of view the band of today with the band that first started back in the day?
Well, I can, because I've been part of it from day one. I can like kind of like reverse engineer it, and it seemed like quite a direct path. There were a couple of like detours, but I can't. I see the vision, and all I was looking for, as I said earlier, I wanted to do what my idols have done, and I wanted to write simple songs but have our own signature stamp. And I think to get a signature stamp, it takes a lot of ideas and a lot of bad ones, and then picking out good ones, and that's pretty much it. So from the start, you can almost count. I actually count the Lucky Lucky and the Confidence record as they're just demos to me. I just
Mm.
see them as well written songs, but not particularly the end product in terms of signature style. So when I look back at them, I just see them as demos. That's all I treat them as. They were just little stepping stones to get to where we wanted. And then as Man's Best Friend, that's more like that's less focused on songwriting and more about the signature style. And I think Red Flag Blues, that's closest we got to being mindful of the songwriting and the sound as well.
And then on that sort of topic of sort of things evolving as well, obviously there have been, a lot of opportunities that have come your way over the years. You've, supported so many decent bands and you've like done so much touring as well. I guess was there a specific moment when you sort of realized that things were starting to take off for the band?
I think so. Through COVID, that were actually a good opportunity for us because just before COVID, we'd got a couple of opportunities that were very exciting and we did work hard to get. But if we're being honest with ourselves, we weren't quite ready for them. And COVID, for all the bad things it did to us and the world, it actually did us a favor because behind closed doors, we were able to work on a few things that we probably needed to work on before jumping onto these opportunities. We weren't quite, in my opinion, we weren't quite good enough just then. And COVID did us a favor. It said, look, we'll close the doors on you guys. You do what you got to do. And when you come out the other side, these opportunities will still be here. And as it happened, as we recorded the Man's Best Friend EP, that's the moment I knew that I and we were good enough in my own eyes, and that was the turning point for me. And then coming out of COVID, that's when the international tour opportunities were there waiting for us again.
Yeah. So had COVID not happened, do you feel that the band would sort of be on this trajectory that it is today?
I can't say that, but I'm grateful that I was able to do that extra bit of working behind closed doors as opposed to publicly.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. I mean, I definitely feel like it's very much a double-edged sword for a lot of people because obviously music was just absolutely handicapped throughout COVID and everything.
Yeah,
But there is that sort of ability to effectively hone your craft and everything.
yeah,
So I can definitely see the benefits there. And I guess you also did touch on the like international like touring opportunities as well. I mean, even just was it this year you guys have been over to the US?
yeah. So we went to US this March, and last year our first international. We went to UK in May 23.
Mm. So how did the overseas audiences react? And of course, I say overseas despite the fact you are an Englishman by birth. It's
Yeah,
effectively like the home crowd if you were playing England, that is. But yeah, how did these audiences react to the band?
yeah, reacted really well. So the first because we'd worked so long to get it, it almost just felt like a lad's holiday with some music played in between.
Mm.
And the gigs that we played over there, yeah, the London gigs, the Brighton gigs, and we did a few up Yorkshire where I'm from, and yeah, they all went really well, really well. And the point of that tour was we got picked up by a UK manager, and he asked us. He basically said, "Look, I can push you as much as you want to be pushed online, but until I've seen you play live, I can't really push your touring opportunities until I've seen you play live." And rightly so, fair play. So we jumped on a plane and we took every opportunity he gave us, and we played a showcase event in London, which just looking back now, that were a good turning point in his career too, because we were put in front of some US industry folks as well, and that's how we would have got the opportunities a year later in the US. So the showcase events went really good. We got more out of them than we could have expected, and the more intimate gigs they went really well too. A couple of shows where we had a couple of sing-alongs actually, which is always, as a lyric writer, for someone to sing your songs back to you, it's kind of dreamy.
Of course, that's like the end goal, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then I was obviously like touching on the US gigs as well there. Like I feel like the US market is a very hard one to crack. So was the reaction there like, positive as well? Because I tend to find that a lot of American crowds, and I say this as someone who is married to an American, I find that the American crowd seem to be a little bit more somewhat nihilistic towards foreign acts sometimes.
Well, we no, we actually no, we didn't find that at all. We got
That's
such
amazing.
in New York and Austin in particular. We played a show in LA on the final night of our tour, which capped off quite nicely. But it was quite a quiet show that it was the day after St. Paddy's Day. So as you can imagine, America was sleeping. And there weren't many people at the LA gig, but we played South by Southwest in Austin, and we played another showcase event in New York called the New Colossus.
Mhm.
And up in New York, New York's a big famous city, man, and it were daunting going in there. We were just five lads from Goldie, and we're just rocking up with some real songs that we believed in, and I feel like that was you asked me earlier about turning points, and I feel like one of the New York shows in particular were yet another turning point, because that was a real step up. We got received really well on the Friday night stage at New Colossus. It was just phenomenal. We got received very well, and then when we went down to Austin, similarly, we did. It was very good for confidence that tour. We did very good.
Well, I'm pretty sure it was Jay-Z who said if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. So, you
Yeah,
know, uh, good times coming, I guess.
yeah, I
Um,
hope so.
and speaking of sort of like, recent events as well, obviously this year, like you've recently had the Unfamiliar Boy single come out and the Red Flag Blues from EP from earlier this year. And but I do want to definitely mention the latter there because you mentioned Iggy Pop earlier, and there's an amazing cover of the Stooges on that EP. So how did that cover of I Want to Be Your Dog come about?
Well, right, so we spoke about it for ages, and like, when I think most bands when they get together, they just jam music that they enjoy, and we were no different in that. We were just jamming grunge songs, and we were jamming a couple of other songs, including the Stooges, and I always wanted to do it, but I didn't want to do it prematurely before we got our own sound. Otherwise, anyone can do that. Anyone can just play a song out as it is on record. If you can play your instruments and you can half sing, you can play the song as it's been written. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to make it our own. So we kind of jammed it for a few years, not frequently. And then once we'd done Man's Best Friend EP, we were like, yeah, let's do Iggy Pop song now. Let's do it properly. And I always wanted to write an extra part. I got an idea for like an extra bridge towards the end, which I chucked in. And yeah, so we just yeah. I always wanted to do it, but I just wanted to do it in good time when we were able to do it. Not justice. I don't want to ever say that we could do the Stooges justice, but we did it to a standard that we were satisfied with.
I'm also only realizing now how fitting it would have been had the "I Want to Be Your Dog" been on the Man's Best Friend EP. Um, but missed opportunities, I guess.
Yeah, I wish I didn't know that. I'll not sleep very well tonight. I'll be kicking myself.
But no, that was a like to me, a cover song is something that is very difficult to get right. You know, I mean, it's very easy to just cover a song, but to get it right and really reimagine it in your own way is it's a hefty task. And I mean, I'm the sort of person who all like I've got a running playlist on Spotify. Whenever I hear a great cover, I add it to my best covers playlist. And that was one. Even halfway through, I was like, this one is ticking the boxes. And I guess for yourself, someone who is a huge fan of Iggy Pop as well, that must just feel good to be able to get something like that out there and say, "Hey, I've covered this song," but also must be a bit daunting, just in case you're thinking, "What if he hears this? You know, will he think it's
Yeah,
good enough?"
and that's kind of, I guess, the daunting side of things is why it probably took us 6 years to get his asses together and actually put his name to one. But yeah, it were once we recorded it and we listened back, it were probably there were a stage where I think when you record your own album, you kind of focus towards your favorite songs at first, and then you burn them out mentally, and then you kind of give the rest of the record a chance. And like during that period where that song was my favorite, I was thinking, yeah, this is we've done pretty good with this one. I don't think he'd be too displeased if he heard this. I don't think he'd be rolling his eyes or cringing. I think he'd be like, yeah, fair play. I would hope anyway.
Yeah. Well, if I ever get him on this podcast, I'll be sure to make sure he's aware of it.
Thank you. Please do.
um, and so, I guess as a more of a penultimate question here, there has been a lot of EPs and singles over the years. So, are you guys hoping to do a full album at some point, or is it more immediate and effective to connect with the audience with these sort of shorter releases?
No, I mean, up until creating music, I can't. I was having a conversation with one of the guys in the band about this last week. Up until making music, I was never interested in EPs. I've collected music since I was a child. I've never once purchased an EP. I've never once cared about an EP. I don't. I want. It's all about that album, and so the next one, it will be an album.
Right. Obviously, recording an album would be great, but I mean, that would have to clearly, vie for attention with you writing your book as well, wouldn't it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah. But yeah, that would be. We discuss this a lot, and
Mhm.
we shouldn't be putting another EP out. We're going to put a couple more singles out, and then I think 2025 the project will be as debut LP.
Well, I can say I'm definitely keen to hear it because if it's half as good as the EPs have been over the years, then I think you guys have already made my album of 2025. um, so I feel we should get down to the trusty chords portion of the podcast. So this part is all about the music that made you. So we're sort of stretching the 1, 3, and 5 format of the standard chord, and I'm asking you about one artist, 3 albums, and 5 songs you can always turn to. Now these don't have to be all by the same artist,
Yeah.
but first question for you here, Ben. Who is the one artist that has inspired you the most, whether it be personally or creatively?
I would say Black Rebel Motorcycle Club. They were. I have bands who I've listened to more. I've got bands that I've listened to for longer. They were the band that made me think, you know what, I would probably like to be in a band.
Mm. I mean, I remember the first time I heard them actually, and there is much like Jim Morrison, as I was sort of saying before. There's a very arresting quality to the music that they play. Like I feel like a lot of the time they can get lumped in with that sort of garage rock revival of the early thousands, bands like The Strokes and Interpol and everything. But
Yeah,
there's something about them that is just so singular and and unique. If I'm not being redundant there.
yeah, I believe so too. And I think everyone's got artists that they feel similarly about. But for me, it's every time they release a record, and I might be a little bit biased, but I try to let my ears listen fairly. Everything they do, it's not a case of am I going to like it? It's a case of how much am I going to like it? And I
Mm.
just feel like if one band that were here who can't put a foot wrong, it's just everything they do, every note, every chord, every lyric, every note. It's just spot on. I just don't think they get it wrong. They just their music is made for my ears,
It's always good when you find that band for you, isn't it?
and it's that band for me.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So next up, what are 3 albums that have impacted you the most? This could just be albums that you're always throwing on or something that was integral to your musical evolution over the years.
Yep. So definitely maybe Oasis's debut.
Mm.
I don't think there's a bad track on there, and I think because they've got a lot of they've got a lot of shoegaze in there. They've got the Britpop, the songwriting's in there. They've got the punky elements. They've got the Beatles elements. I just think it's a combination of brilliance, and I think, yeah, I can't think of a better pound for pound record, to be honest, than that for me. Another one which I listen to all the time is, and I've actually got a poster on my wall next to me in my living room, is the Velvet Underground and Nico, the Banana album.
Oh yes.
I just Christ, it's just it sounds some of the songs on that record. It sounds like it would. If someone said to you, you never heard it before, and they said this was recorded last week, you'd just believe it. You'd be like, yeah, I can see that. That sounds brilliant.
Mm.
And it's 60 years old, man. Yeah, so it's just beautiful. Venus in Furs, Heroin. They're just stunning songs. Really,
It holds up so well, doesn't it?
it really does.
I mean, honestly, even just last week, actually, yeah, it was only last week. I listened to the album in full while driving, and I was just amazed at how fresh it sounds. Like so many albums of those eras, they feel so dated, but that one is just it's timeless. Is the best way of putting it.
It is, and you could listen to like records in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, and some of them records sound older than that record that we're talking about now, and it's literally 30 up to 30 years older than it.
Yeah.
Especially Venus in Furs, that's fantastic. It's just a great record, which I listen to most weeks. I think I listen to it on Sunday, and it also sounds like we've got a vinyl obsession. We love collecting records, and we just love vinyl. And some sounds and some records were made to be on wax, and that is the epitome of a wax record.
Yeah, and you got one album left. What would you pick for that one?
I would probably pick Black Rebel Motorcycle Club, Baby 81, and I just think that showcases what they're about as a band the best. Each album's different, but I think that's the one where they showed as much of themselves as they could in one record, and the guitar sounds and the energy is just it's just fierce.
It really is an amazing album. I mean, I think I remember wondering how they'd sort of follow up from Howl, but to come out with an
Yeah,
album like that, they did very well.
yeah. And
Uh,
Howl misunderstood. If I remember right, or if I'm informed correctly, I think they got dropped by the label after Howl, which is they've got a lot of good songs on there. It's brilliant, but yeah, they backed it up really well. They came back strong with Baby 81.
And I guess lastly, I'd love to know the five songs you can always turn to, whether it be for comfort, for excitement, anything at all, your five trusty songs.
Right. So Venus in Furs, as we've just touched upon, it just makes the hair stand up. It's just so filthy, but so beautiful at the same time. It's such a druggy song. So Venus in Furs by Velvet Underground and Nico.
Mhm.
Um, Champagne Supernova by Oasis. It were actually playing while my daughter was born as well, which makes it even more special. But I feel like I've probably got five phenomenal stories to that one song alone, and it's a
Mm.
great song anyway. I used to think it was a great song before I had any stories to put to it, but I just like conveniently I've got a lot of really beautiful moments around that song as well. So Champagne Supernova, but not just for sentimental reasons, but because it's a bloody good song.
It's
So
always
always,
really lovely when you have that confluence of those wonderful memories pairing with a song like that, and it just makes it all the more special. It's it's the icing on the cake, effectively.
yeah, absolutely. Another one would be I'm gonna go with Fault Line by Black Rebel Motorcycle Club. That's a song from the Howl record.
Mhm.
That is the song that made me want to pick up a guitar and just learn some basic chords. And it's just such a simple little beauty. But yeah, for that reason alone, that are all this, like usually like guitarists, they like riffy songs and they want to like riff out, and rightly so. That's what guitars are made for. But for me, I heard Fault Line by Black Rebel, and I just thought that makes me want to pluck a guitar.
Yeah, right.
Yep. Be a third one. It's funny when you put on the spot. There's millions of songs that we've heard, and just trying to narrow it down to five, your mind becomes quite vacant. I'm gonna have to go with "Here Comes the Sun" by Beatles.
Of
It's just so
course.
pretty. Like, who doesn't love that song? Even when you hear so many different covers of that song, and I can be just drinking a pint across the road, and someone could play it, and they could absolutely murder that song, and it just wouldn't make a difference. I'd enjoy listening to that song. It's just too pretty to be killed.
Absolutely.
So yes, and finally, I would probably say "Rise of the Storm" by the Doors, because that was a song that I heard when I was a child, and
Mm.
the obsession on that song it's just the epitome of cool.
It's a truly wonderful song. I remember actually being somewhat terrified by that song when I was younger.
It is haunting, very
It
haunting.
it is very haunting. I mean, I don't know if it's quite as haunting as, the end, for example, but, I think it's just something about the atmosphere of, like, just the storm aspect of it and, hearing
Yeah,
sort of, Jim Morrison's voice just break through and, break on through the other side, if you will. But, yeah, no, it's a brilliant example of a brilliant musician, isn't it?
it is, and it really. I think I mean, obviously the storm sound effects it does help, but I think even without them, it is. it does kind of illustrate a storm kind of feel. It just paints quite the picture, and I think musically, there's not many songs that does that as well.
I agree wholeheartedly. Well, Ben Simpson, I want to say thank you so very much for being so generous with your time and being so eloquent as a guest as well. And thank you for being part of the Trusty Chords podcast.
No, thanks very much. I appreciate it, Ty. Thanks for your time, mate.
Thank you for listening to Trusty Chords. If you've made it this far, then you have my eternal gratitude for listening to the end, though I'm going to assume it was Ben's charming nature that kept you listening, wasn't it? Hey, while you're here, if you want to give this podcast a like, share, or rating on your preferred platform, that would be just golden. There's no obligation to do so, but I really appreciate it. Also, if you want to follow along on social media, you can find me on all the main channels, Instagram and Facebook at Trusty Chords Podcast, all one word. There's also a blog for this podcast over on my own website, which is tylerjenke.com. That's TYLERJENKE/Trusty Chords Podcast, all one word. You can find entries on each of the episodes as they go live, links to all the appropriate parts of this podcast, the artists, albums, and 5 songs chosen by guests each week, along with the accompanying playlist too. You can also find a link to the Buy Me a Coffee platform, where you can swing me a few dollars to support this podcast if you feel so inclined. Lastly, I need to thank Ben Simpson for being part of the podcast this week. I also need to express my gratitude to Fiona at On The Map PR for helping organise this chat as well. But once again, thank you kindly for listening, and I hope to see you all again next week as I continue to celebrate music and those that create it.